Good morning, folks. Welcome to Coffee with Artists. My name is Rachel Wilkins. I am the host of the Smart Art Business Podcast, also the co-founder of Conception Arts. Delighted this morning to be joined by Devin Cogger, who is an artist currently based in Texas, but originally from Portland, Oregon. So Devin, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Rachel. It's good to be here.
Wonderful. And I'm loving that piece in the background there. Is that a new one? Is that something you just worked on?
I'd say it's about 40% done. It's something I've been struggling with. I've actually repainted it several times. It's one of those paintings where you just can't. It's going to take some extra work to get through. But yeah, it's in progress.
So right now you are currently in is it a year-long residency?
Yes, it started last May, and it's down in Bryan, Texas. And it's a newer thing that they brought to the town. They've got a couple other art residencies here, but essentially the program and the reason why I went into it is because, again, it's a year long. That's a nice, comfortable time. It's a big window. Not all residencies are of that duration. And then and it's a nice, great little arts community, rural area. So it's in a way, I think of it as a gift of, it offers time and space to really build on one's body of work. And so that's kind of what I was really looking for. It's been great. It's been about a year now. So.
Wow. So how did this opportunity come about? And is it the first time you've done a residency like this?
It is my first residency. It's not my first time applying. I think that's, you really just have to apply to a lot of them and apply to ones that are right for you. And I had applied to a handful after grad school, and this was the first one where I was accepted, but also one of the ones where I was like, wow, this would be a big change. I'd have to pretty much pack up and move for a year, but I was absolutely okay. I was a little hesitant at first, but really, I mean, it's important to have that time and space to work on your practice unhindered by some of the constraints I was facing in the city in Portland. So yeah, it was my first residency, and it's been really rewarding. I know they're all different. They all come with a different set of pros and cons. But this one was correct for me for what I was looking to do. And it's a great space too. I'll see if I can whirl you around here.
Yeah, let's take a look.
It's a live-in studio.
Oh, wow.
And they fund and support your material costs, and there's a stipend and that sort of thing. I'll just kind of do a quick whirl around. I can have a lot of paintings up on the wall at the same time.
Oh my goodness.
And just kind of, it's a nice, open studio. And I can open the main door here to the public and do studio visits. So
that's amazing.
It's a nice concoction of certain ingredients that are a little bit harder in the city to get unless you have a storefront or something like that. This is my first foot into that kind of experience.
That's kind of the artist's dream, right? To just be immersed in your work for a year, like without any. Well, I'm sure there are some distractions, but with a sole purpose of just producing work. How has that experience felt?
It's, it comes with responsibility. It's, you really have to, at first it's like, wow, I could just work on one painting this whole time and make a really, it's just, these are time management things. These are way, like, how can I make the most productivity of my studio time here? But also maybe this is enough time for me to try to push my practice into other areas too and experiment with other things. So what I've kept my main inquiry, my line of work. I want to continue expanding on the body of work I've made, because I made a significant amount of it. And each one I'm learning more things, and I'm getting good feedback from folks. But also it has been a time for more experimentation. I've been dabbling into a little bit of the digital arts and almost more illustration based and a little bit of animation as well. And these are totally new areas for me. I never took any coursework or classes in them, but some of my influences for my art happen to have worked in those different genres and fields, and so it's nice to kind of get my hands in some of those other materials, be it digital. That's kind of what it's been lately. And I think it's an emergent field too. I want to have a sense of literacy in the digital platforms for making at least 2D art and time-based art. And who knows? I think that one of my goals is to kind of work my way in eventually into a role in foundations teaching, and that's a big subject. And a lot of students are interested in that too. And it's a lot of how they consume art and other visual media through these digital platforms. And so it only makes sense to at least be versatile in that way and to experiment. So.
And in a way, there's I mean, we're going to really get into your work, but there is almost a science futuristic element in terms of the inquiry of your work, of the experience of your work. It has these biomorphic qualities to it. And do you see that perhaps there's an opportunity there to merge maybe something like AI into your practice?
Yeah, it was one of my first thoughts coming here. I'll take a note of that just in case we want to wrap around to that. But it was something I looked into. I think for me I think I'd have to get into maybe looking into taking an evening course at an institution where they have a lot of that tech. Some of those VR headsets, the technology, first of all, is changing. So by the time you get set up, it'll probably be outdated next year.
Right.
But I think it's a fascinating field, all constraints and speed bumps and barriers aside. It's absolutely wild, especially like given the current circumstance of social distancing and self-isolating. Like that was one of my first thoughts too about that, is like, oh wow, this is when we're really going to start asking these questions about VR and at least augmented reality. And before, I think less and less they're becoming like a funny kind of like, augmented, what are we talking about? Some kind of sci-fi. So like, no, they're doing that. There's really sophisticated programs. And at the same time, one of my favorite parts about looking into where it is right now is when you see artists. I think there's a few residencies-ish where it's just developers looking to test their product, and they'll say, hey, okay, you're an artist. Let's see what you can do with this new software that we've developed and this new headset, and let's see what happens. We'll make a little video about it. And I've seen some really great stuff and a lot of really choppy, blocky kind of.
Yep.
And it's perfect. It's raw. It's like it's a great time to investigate that because it hasn't been so specialized yet. People are dabbling in it, and dabbling is that's where you want to jump into the pond. It's not super saturated right now. So I think a lot of, granted, education is a little bit, is encountering they're doing virtual, kind of like we're doing now, virtual classes and stuff, but those new student bodies are going to be they're on the forefront of that field. And we'll see how that trickles in, if it does, and how it does trickle into the greater art world, and how I'm curious if what your experience has, if you've been noticing either in your chats with other artists or galleries you're affiliated with, or critics or just other artists what's their take on this? Is it happening yet, or is it just kind of on the back burner?
It's happening. I think there's a curiosity across the board. And I think that we're just waiting for someone to show us where we fit in the process. Personally, I was home in the UK visiting family, and my cousin's kind of a techie, and he had the Oculus, the Facebook Oculus. Is it the Oculus? Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, the Rift.
Right. And so, I was eager to try it, and, just absolutely astounded by how it can shift your perception of where you are in the world in a couple of seconds. Because I was thinking, it's just, it's not going to change my feeling and my sense of self and where I am. But within a few minutes of wearing this headset, and just to kind of set the scene, it was, you were an astronaut, and you were going up in like one of those, you were going up like an elevator that was outdoors up to the top of the rocket.
Yeah.
So to stand there and kind of look down at your hands, and you have your hands in front of you, and you see somebody else's hands, and to look and see a person stood next to you, and you can see all the features of their face, and then really feel like you're moving through this experience. Now, I couldn't help think of, in the 80s or the early 90s when, I'm 39, so I'm aging myself here, but, growing up and playing like the likes of a Sega Mega Drive, right? Or Nintendo, and how the graphics were, we thought they were great for the time.
Yeah.
And then you think today, 30 years on, where video games are, right? Like it's incredible. Right. And I thought, what is that experience going to be like in 10 years? Like, what is that VR experience going to be like? Are we going to be really questioning what's real and what's not? Not to mention, like, obviously, with the Oculus, it's this very clunky, kind of heavy experience. But, we're obviously going to have more improved hardware that we experience these, these scenes in. And it can only improve. Like, I feel like there's just such almost a question of, the question could come, like, which is the real one? Which one do I want to exist in? And I think that's kind of frightening.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's I think there will be we can look forward to a nostalgia for this time period when they are those clunky headsets.
Right.
And then there'll be something else entirely, implanted, who knows. But the video game industry is kind of been on the forefront of pushing that, because it's the entertainment industry that is really kind of putting out the money and the demand for those kind of technologies. And I think that's why there might be a stigma around it entering the domain of high art, or just art, a separate practice, not an entertainment-based thing, but sort of more how we define art, depending on whether it's a social practice or a cognitive inquiry, or more experiential, all the things that art can be, that entertainment, that separate itself from, sure, the boundaries blur, but that separate itself from the video game entertainment industry, or Hollywood, and how they depict these kinds of scenes and kind of narratives about how that could develop and become problematic and invasive. So those are all things to take into account. And then, but here on the art side, we can just kind of keep an eye on how this is developing. And if you have access to it, bring it to let's see how that operates in the cube setting, or whatever, gallery space, or a digital, like, when I think about, okay, it's hard to get access to some of these things unless you're in an institution or working with an agency where you can have these things as part of your industry. The other side of that is, once you do get a handle on it, and maybe share it with your art friends and have an exhibit, or have a virtual exhibit, that accessibility flips, and it's suddenly, you can post it online, you could TikTok, all these platforms, and kind of get a sense for how it's going. And I think it's wildly interesting. Yeah. There's
so much possibility in the exploration of VR just in general. There was a question that was asked a couple of days ago. I hope she's watching, actually. Jan Phillips asked a great question to Suzanne Scott, and it kind of has me thinking on this topic. She asked, if you could spend time in any painting, which painting would you spend time in? Like, physically, like, kind of a move. And I'm thinking, like, there's a possibility to almost extend the narrative of existing work that's already out there, like work by the masters, to have this, like, almost three-dimensional experience within classic art, or timeless amounts of artwork. Like,
absolutely.
Jan's here. She said, I'm here. It was a great question, Jan, and it really kind of sat with me. And, thinking about the possibilities of VR and, where we can take this.
Mm-hmm.
You certainly could. Like, I think about, getting inside, say, a Tanguay or a Salvador Dali painting and seeing things
Oh, yeah.
kind of 3D would just be such a trippy, incredible experience.
Right. Yeah. It'd be in the kind of somewhere between, I could see them advertising like, take a browse through this collection of our early surrealist work for a tranquil and maybe slightly disturbing experience. And it could be a whole retrospective of all these different movements, but through VR, and where artists have come in and reopened the conversation, literally reopened the work, non-intrusively, non-invasively to the actual work, all digital, all hands off, and I think they would talk a lot about it being a conversation with these classic canonical pieces, and it'd be a dialogue with these artists. I think they'd talk a lot about that in the first thing. That'd be a great way to get some of the museums and some of the collectors who have these pieces to it reanimates and puts charge back into these old works and opens the conversation back up. So yeah. Suddenly they become contemporary.
Right. I wonder if it raises the question of ethics, because I'm thinking about, I forget who it was. Was it maybe it was Elvis, where they recreated him in hologram form and had him perform, and there were people saying, it's not, or maybe it was some of the actors as well, like James Dean or somebody. I forget. Jan, you probably know. So give me a shout out if you remember. But there was a question of, is it ethical? This person is not, it's their art. Like, did that may not have been how they wanted, to be their legacy or to be remembered. Like, you then have that question of ethics. Like, do you see that?
I think it would definitely. I think it's definitely something to be mindful of. You want to, we'd hope that it would be done. These things would be done with a lot of to know your subject, to know the artist, to be responsible in the way that you represent that work. And I think there will be plenty of cases where it totally gets out of hand, and people will call each other out, and they'll say, this has gone too far, but that's just how appropriation tends to work, right? I mean, imagery and things get appropriated all the time and wildly exploited, and it's up to us to police ourselves and be responsible for these technologies. I think absolutely we'll want to be mindful of it.
Right.
Yeah. And that'll be it'll just make us better people in the end, because every time we have a new technology or something, there's a danger with it. So we have to have those discussions.
It's definitely a responsibility for sure. So as a creative person, how do you think that, with clearly an interest in that field, that AI field, how do you think it would inform your creative decisions in terms of what you're creating right now and where you might want to progress?
A couple of different things. I think that, so right now with my now that we've talked about all these kind of more grander forms of digital making, I've just been taking this baby step and introducing myself to working on a tablet and really familiarizing and getting very comfortable with with undo features, being able to kind of correct your marks, different kind of mark making entirely. So that would be the first thing I'd mention, is that how it would inform my practice is that it would have a huge impact on being on the actual process of working, be it painting. In that case, it would probably be more like akin to sculpting, right? Because you have that third dimension and you're literally walking around your work. So you have this kind of more spatial sense of awareness for how you construct space. I think it'd be a lot like sculpting in that way. And then with whatever software it is, you're going to be able to have work in layers and to be able to, if you make a mistake, you can quickly undo it. You can maybe I'll lose a few files and talk about documenting and saving correctly. All these things that are already discussions in graphic design and illustration, any other digital field where they have that component. In terms of just being able to walk around in the work, I think it would change it entirely. And I think, I think it would change the read too, because I've been thinking a lot about, or it's just been a question like, why am I painting? Why am I sculpting? Why am I not doing some other medium or working in some other way? And for me, so far, it's been that painting and sculpture they have a large history behind them, and there's a kind of legibility to them. They for viewership, they prompt a certain kind of engagement that's generally expected, where if you hang something on the wall, and if you hang it in a context where this is art happening here, the viewers will. This is what I hope to get out of my work, is that they activate it through language, or they activate it through interpretation. This idea that the viewer completes the work and even takes authorship of it a little bit by projecting their language onto it. And especially that's what I'm interested in, because I want my work to be about ambiguity and what ambiguity does to prompt creative language, descriptions and such from the viewer. And so how that would change in a virtual space, I think at first it would be all the aspects that are slightly garish or just a little too much in my work that kind of give it a pushback would be amplified. I think it would be a kind of almost Boschian space. It would be kind of tormenting, or just it'd be like being inside of a body, of a being, of an organism, and walking around. These things, I think they'd have a bigger relationship to the body in scale too, and I think they really would read more as organ or as living vessel. So, and the rest, I just have to find out. But yeah, I'd love to try it.
So I want to circle back to something that you said there that has me thinking about how this could be perceived and experienced. You mentioned that the undo button, right? Something that we have in digital, but we don't really have, especially really in painting. I think the digital platforms are a lot more forgiving than perhaps, working with oil or working with acrylic or even pencil, whatever, classical kind of medium.
Right.
Do you think then we end up in a space where perfection is kind of what people experience? They don't really see the hand of the artist as much, and then do we become something beyond art? Do we become more about design?
I could see that. I think that when you have the ability to undo, you want to perfect it and get it so that you erase the artist's hand. But that being said, I feel like if I had an audience of people working in a design or an illustration field where they work with that button all the time, I'd be interested to hear what they say about that, and what their perspective on the artist's hand, or this kind of a painterly versus really softly or sharp or soft rendered thing, where there's a separation between you don't see the artist's hand in the work or the mark. But I think that I don't know. I'd have to ask them, because I think there are a number of tools where that imitate the artist's hand or imitate a brush stroke, and that those are maintained, but they get them just right. So it's this idea of like imperfections and how we define those that would change, and they're always changing. I think how art has changed over the last few hundred years is how we go back from relying on perspective, relying on hyperrealism, to relying on different forms of deconstructing an image and presenting it as simple lines and shapes, or dots, or just color fields, or how we break apart space has always been fluctuating. And I think that will always be kind of like a trend in fashion. Things go out of fashion and come back in. So yeah.
I feel the technology though is where we as a historically as creatives or as people who view creativity or are around it or educators or critics, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Technology is where we have a really hard time because there is such history and such honor and respect for those that have come before us that we're certainly resistant. If you just think about like the photography movements, like it was never really grouped in the same category as fine art. I think even now today there's people that really just resist photography as being fine art. And then of course you have the wave of, iPhone photography, and then you have the photography community that rejects the iPhone photography. So there's always this constant struggle for the new and shiny technology that's available to us being rejected by the movement right before it. So I hope that we don't limit our possibilities in what things like VR can do for us.
Yeah. As well. So maybe in that play out of the narrative of how this technology trickles into history, into art, if it took a similar path to photography where it at times found its way, it was also controversial, and then it fizzled out because other technology replaced it. Maybe it will just become more, maybe art will still continue on its own trajectory, and it'll allow it in a few times, but maybe it'll just become like how the photograph has become, where the way that art is spread and experienced and captured will just change. Like maybe this is just the next step for the iPhone. It'll become the Google Glass or something. It's just the way that we experience imagery and capture it and store it and share it. It's all part of that path, and it always maybe that's what's going to happen. And we will still walk into galleries and museums, but we'll do it from home virtually through our headsets. And we'll still look at the same, we'll still look at classical pieces, and we'll look at new work and contemporary work, but we'll do it from home or, something like that. I could see that playing out.
And I would love to get your opinion on this, because you're a millennial, right? You're in that bracket. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm kind of I think we're like Gen Z. We're like the ones that grew up without tech, like without cell phones. And then I think my first cell phone, I was probably 20. So I had the experience of both, right? Having instant accessibility and not having it. Like my teenage years was spent disappearing and, had a curfew that I had to come back at. And that was that. Like there was no phoning, no texting.
Right.
And I think that certainly for me personally, I have absolutely a desire to just inform myself so much with what's happening digitally and what possibilities are exciting to me. But there's also that yearning for just something very simplistic in many aspects, whether that's, obviously we're in a situation right now where we have to communicate online. But
right now, especially. Absolutely.
For anyone who's watching this in the future, this is, we're right in the middle of the 2020 pandemic. Yeah. So yes, it's amazing to have all this technology at our fingertips. And I think, what would we do without Zoom and Facebook and all this fabulous stuff? But at the same time, it makes you realize how much you miss the human connection of just being in a room with other humans and having, conversation and, shared experiences. And I feel like as well, there's always kind of a reaction to a certain movement, right? There's like a counter reaction,
right?
Just even what we're seeing politically, right? We were very liberal, now we're very right wing. Like there's always kind of an ebb and a flow to what's happening. And I think about what my concept of what might happen as we race forward with these technological advancements is that there's going to be this yearning for the simpler life, right? We look at, the likes of people who are going off the grid, right? People creating that experience without cell phones, without TVs, without these kind of things. Well, I wonder if that will impact the artwork, and maybe there will be a resurge of people wanting the physical product, the old master style artwork. Do you feel that that's something that you could see happening? And as a millennial, how do you feel about the tech versus the kind of off the grid lifestyle?
Well, I guess I share that feeling, and I think a lot of folks do right now, about wanting to, we want to get back to how things were. When it's kind of like, oh, we kind of took a few things for granted for a while, because now that we don't have it, now we want it. But for art, painting, I spend a lot of time in the studio, and I have been, but working on a painting is still farther away from socializing than working digitally, where I know I can share it instantaneously, or like being on a digital platform. So I think that could absolutely happen, but at the same time, there's a lot of uncertainty right now as to how what normal will look like, and so how we will have to come up with, if things continue to be risky to the point where we do have to, it's a long-term social distance kind of plan that we have to cook up, and we will have to get creative in how we satisfy that yearning and desire to kind of be physically present, and to be in the moment, versus this other thing that a lot of artists make really good work about, what technology is doing to us. Mm-hmm. So right now, we're really dependent on it, and it's a little bit scary. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of good work can come out of that too, though. A lot of strong work, a lot of powerful work that needs to happen right now. And I'm wondering if it's irresponsible to not make work about the moment right now, because I see a lot of folks doing it. And I've heard a lot of mixed opinions on that too. But for artists that are looking for a place to make work and to speak to their experience of something that's relevant right now, that they can make work about this. Or I've seen a lot of folks really just stopping their studio practice and just making masks, or like trying to integrate those two things together.
Amazing.
And it's pretty cool. I'm looking into making a few myself, awesome. As a way to kind of talk about art in person, but it's not a painting I'm walking around with, but it kind of is.
That's amazing.
So,
I know you and I have kind of had the conversation around, when I look at your work, it's incredibly biomorphic to me. I see anatomy, I see biology, I see science when I experience your work, and we've discussed that the possibility of you maybe reaching out to some of those institutions and having a conversation at least, and it does feel like your work particularly would lend itself to some form of interpretation. Have you thought about what that might look like?
Sorry. In particular to kind of
the virus itself.
Right. So it's funny, I was thinking about that, and a lot of my work right now looks more bacterial than viral. So I think I've had to, that would be a purposeful act of working from a source, like looking into the visual anatomy of a virus, or some visual component that's recognizable, and then extrapolating parts of that would work with the way that I like to make marks. And then I think I would be interested in that, so long as that legibility of this is influenced very, very apparently by the virus. So I want to keep that to a minimum, because I don't want it to be read quite so readily. I want it to still be an ambiguous tug and push and pull at a given exchange. So I think it's definitely something I'm thinking about. Yeah.
So let's talk about the art, because I know we've talked about tech for 30 minutes, but
yeah.
Tell our viewers, kind of a breakdown of what it is that you do, how you kind of landed in this, within these ideas, and what you hope the viewer perceives when they experience your work.
Yeah.
And that's original piece in the background that you're working on right now, right? As an example.
Right. Yeah. So with, how I've been thinking a lot about how I present work in terms of how I present it through language, particularly because I get more and more interested in how language operates with my work, with just work in general. And I think I would, formally, I describe it as a form of painting that pulls on different genres, art historical genres, abstract painting, particular modes of that, surrealist painting, biomorphic abstraction, some of the different, I can point to different parts in history where certain works bring in similarities, like one of which you mentioned earlier in a different context, but Yves Tanguy, and those kind of the forms that populated his picture planes. If you remove the suggestion of a landscape expanse, or that was kind of canonical for a lot of surrealist work, that kind of expansive space, if you take that out and you just are left with these objects, it's a perplexing, overlapping conglomerate of forms, and that's really interesting to me. And so that I basically work with a lot of those kind of forms, and again, so they pull from the art canon in that respect, and then they also pull from some of the natural sciences. Like they give that biomorphic effect where it's speaking to different facets of geology and biology, microbes, and different, almost like bacteria or single-celled organisms that thrive in a kind of geological crust. And so it rifles through those natural science cabinets and takes a few vials of this and petri dishes of that, and kind of dumps out the culture and works with those. And then equally, so those are two, the sciences and the arts, and then I add a third flavor with it, with the way that I title the works and the way that I use language, and then just the overall use of color and such. And it becomes, if I put it more playfully, this kind of a terrarium, or like a microbial candy land of Frankenstein, Wonkian, Seussian influences, different things, almost like a Peter Saul or Kenny Scharf, but with different sensibilities and a little bit more pockets of open space. And they kind of gurgle and throb with an effervescent kind of pulsating, they want to move, they want to be animated. And so, but they're still static. And so that's where this viewing experience, like when something reads simultaneously as ant abdomen, airplane, plane turbine, vacuum cleaner attachment, gumdrop, jelly bean, all these things simultaneously are incongruously shown together and kind of linked up. What does the viewer make sense of those things? And I think that right there, what I just said, this kind of associative language and kind of classifying and identifying certain parts of it, is when that's interesting to me. They're creating work right there. That's just the painting, and the space becomes almost like a workshop. And they become benches, tool benches for the viewer to kind of start tinkering with and deconstructing and inventing really creative imagery. There's this thing that I've been looking at just in my spare time, back to the digital thing real quick, and AI. There's this thing called Quick Draw. I think Google owns it, and it's developing this kind of responsive AI where you can sit on your computer or on your phone, and it's better on the computer, but you can draw in, it gives you a few prompts, very simple prompts, and you just draw in a little 2D stick figure on your keypad, and it will start guessing what you're drawing based on the data that it's already received. So if it gives you like coffee cup or windmill, you kind of draw those things in, and it'll start guessing things. And while you're drawing, it's the funniest thing, it'll start throwing out different descriptors, mostly nouns at this point, but it could do verbs. I think that would be really exciting if it started getting that advanced with language and building like a syntax structure, because it's kind of like the French movement, the ULIPO, a workshop for creative writing, where it was constraint-based writing, and a lot of there was this kind of idea about computers making literature and different ways to solve writer's block with this kind of technology, and it was cool. But it's kind of like that, and it just throws these words at you, and in your periphery while you're drawing, you're building this picture in your head of what it's throwing at you, and it's really interesting. So that's kind of what I think the ambiguity does, as a concept.
And some of those descriptions that you mentioned, the vacuum cleaner or eyeballs, right? These are actual responses that you've had from the audience when they've stood in front of your work, right? These are not things that you've perceived.
Right, and critique sessions too. Back in school, a lot of great material would come out of critique sessions and such. And then myself too. I'll do a little bit. It's impossible for me not to do that too. And when I reflect on that, I put those things into my titles. So things that I pull out of it, I put in the title, and I try to be strategic about it. I try to make titles that are playfully, I use a lot of alliteration. Sometimes I use a rhyme scheme, or sometimes I use just a series of words that suggest a few things. And maybe they're almost like prompts, or because a title sets the tone for a work a lot of times. And so sometimes you'll go to the artist statement to find out more about why it's titled that. Sometimes it's self-apparent. Other times you look for it in the work. And as long as it's not didactic or straight, legible in the work, that's what I want to avoid. So I want it to be a kind of a puzzling experience. Not a puzzle, because a puzzle suggests a point of solving it, a point of resolution. Whereas the goal is just in the pursuit of trying to identify and extrapolate on the ambiguity. So,
can you maybe give us some examples of titles?
I would say that I can give a few. I could give a string of words that all of the time, there's a piece. I'll swing it over there. That one kind of right there in the center. That one's abundance in the bulbescent ballroom. And so there's a couple of bumbling bees in there, and it's kind of this kind of poetic Seussian almost approach to it. Or and I think of these. If I were to put a narrative together about the ballroom, and then you have these purple pluckable pebbles and Pacinian corpuscle plexes and bulbous buoys and buoyant bobbers surfacing in a sea of shape-shifting signifiers caught in a froth of a flumbuzzle. Sometimes I'll make up words like flumbuzzle. And let's have those flumbuzzles kind of flailing upon a precarious stack of flaps, folds, and floating phthalocyanine capsules and emerald escape pods, so forth until syntax structure kind of crumbles and language is lost at sea. And then you have a kind of superconductive Furby marmalade served with eschatismo hoog hogwash. And so I want to just make up words at that point and just start uttering things. There's this idea, there's this concept of verbal glossolalia. And commonly, a lot of it's talked about in terms of folks who, this idea of speaking in tongues or different ways that basically babbling, adult babbling. I take hogwash seriously, and I love babbling in painting, in sculpture, and in language. And I think it comes to this idea of play, and maybe we could tie play in the value of play and the value of babbling, both for developing the way that babbling works to develop language, tinkering in technology, where the value of that leads to technology, leads to innovation, And then play, social play too, really important for developing interpersonal relationships. And all these things are really healthy activities. They're like a little nursery ground of things that you want to have growing. You want to cultivate these skills and have them germinate and grow. And then it comes back to this kind of organic growth kind of theme I've got going on. So
I love just your passion and your colorful explanations of your work. You're so immersed in it. It's beautiful to see. Did you have an autistic childhood? Did you play with art as a child, or was this always your calling, or did you?
Yeah, I played with. I don't think I ever stopped. So that's it. I'm always like, oh no, I constantly play. Work. I try to make work play. In the various. Art right now. Fortunately, it's been a real privilege to be able to investigate art for this year full time. But prior to that, hasn't always been that way. And so art becomes this kind of playtime when I'm not at work or not paying the bills, that kind of thing. Or not, before that it was school. And that was a different set of privileges there. And so, but I think there are strategies, maybe you can't get into the studio, or maybe you can't, you have to do the 9 to 5 or something. And that's what I was doing, but I would always keep a sketchbook on me. I always wanted to, and a lot of times I would write in my sketchbooks too, or just it doesn't have to be, I really admire folks who keep like a really nice presentable sketchbook, and that's a body of work. That's a gallery right there, that sketchbook. But or it's a tablet, and you can do that too. But having a place to jot down ideas. I remember walking around on the sales floor at one of my other positions. I'd always have these scraps of notes in my pockets, and I was working on this kind of way to just go through I felt like my jobs were getting the best of me and taking away my time. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go through all of my memories of my life and also work on studio art while doing my job here. And I just would like keep doing notes. I'd pretend to be like, talking to folks, but I'd also be multitasking and writing down like, different ways to talk about an orb, or in different forms, orbicular, bulbous kind of, balloon. And I would just write these kind of word maps. So you can still, I think, make progress even if you're out of the studio. There are strategies you can do that.
I can totally relate to that. I was thinking back to bartending in the city, and just being so over the experience of being a bartender in the middle of Manhattan and dealing with 300 people a day, but always having that little napkin in the corner behind the bar where I'd be writing ideas and just brainstorming what I was going to do next. So I think we all experienced that. But were you creative from a young age? Did that something that started out young for you, or did you find that kind of later on?
I'd say kind of like I would always draw on stuff as a kid, and there's pictures of me with sweating, my hair all over the place, my tongue is out, over a drawing or something. But I don't think that I really. I think I was always drawing, but it was like really, I don't know. I would draw characters quarreling, that kind of thing, or I think it was more later on, maybe in my. I must have been probably just starting to go into the adolescent pubic phase, and that's when something changed for me. I think I started drawing almost overnight. Things changed. I don't know why, and I don't, I think just boundaries come down and you start investigating things, and one thing leads to another. But I've been drawing these similar forms in my work. Like I have a little sketch right here. They're everywhere. It's just kind of a centralized button or visor, or kind of like a focal area, almost the same way that a face operates, like the way that pattern recognition works for, when you see another human, the face is an information hub. And a hub is a nice way to explain that or to describe that kind of centralized form. Mm-hmm. And then there's all this kind of appendages and things affixed and adorned to its exterior. Mm-hmm. So in that way, it is really biological or referencing kind of the way some kind of organisms are constructed, that kind of anatomy. And there's a few paintings where they start to read almost like in the language of portraiture when they're kind of presented that way. And and if you you could do certain things to make it read like that. Mm-hmm. And that started at a young age. Yeah, I did.
Awesome. So we're going to take a couple of questions in a moment.
Yeah.
Before we do, I want to know what's next, because I met you in the middle of this residency when you were still kind of figuring it out, and you, like you said, you were coming up to the 12-month mark. So where do you see where do you see yourself going physically next, and what do you hope to accomplish in the next kind of 5 years?
Yeah, so I'm gonna have a few more months here, a couple more, just to stay safe. They've offered to extend the duration a little bit longer, just so I can. Because planning right now is a little bit hard for travel, and that kind of thing. And plus, we want to be, don't want to be, spreading things. And so it's nice that I can stay situated for a little bit longer. But the goal for me is to, I do want to head back to the Northwest and ideally continue. It'll be a more modest studio practice, but to get back into Portland and take what I've learned here and continue making. I think, my time will be sacrificed a little bit. I got to go back to working a day job and, taking care of things. So this has been a really great privilege, but it's not over. Mm-hmm. And I'd love to see conception arts kind of make their way out to Portland and other opportunities like that. I think that model that you really empower a lot of aspiring artists who want to have a way to have exposure. And I really hope that the COVID situation changes, or that we can come up with another strategy like this virtual thing for showing work and to keep the dialogue going. I think it's really important. And I think that's my plan, is to head back to the Northwest and hopefully have some shows. I've got a lot of work I want to start, but I have to figure that out.
I hope so too. And once we can, throw events again, we'll definitely be. Portland is on our list for sure, and obviously we did some stuff in Seattle. So I like that side of the country a lot. It's beautiful. The weather reminds me of home.
Yeah.
But I know there's a lot of creative people up there, so we will definitely be making our way up there. Okay, so a couple of questions. Jan, so Devin, same thought, 1 week, 1 piece per day, so you can only choose 7 pieces of your own work. Which pieces would you pick to be your virtual Zoom background? Jan, I love your questions. They're so thoughtful.
Wow. Okay. 1 week, 1 piece a day, 7 pieces of my own work, I'm assuming, or?
Yep.
Okay. I can zoom around the room and do 7 right now. I'd say I do this piece right here. This is a 8.5, I think, foot painting called Aquarium Amalgam. It's kind of like a terrarium between aquatic, subterranean space. I'd go to this one, Garish Granules. It's a lot more geologic. It's got a lot of small, fine detail. I think you've seen that one before, Rachel. And then you've also seen this one. This is one of my favorites, Copious Conglomerate of Crevices, a kind of jewel-toned burnt sienna scape with a lot of turquoise in there. Definitely a favorite. That's 3. I already showed you Bulbescent Ballroom and the abundance here. This is one where I incorporated a couple of duck forms. I think I would put that one in because it's interesting.
I've seen that one. That one you showed with us.
Yes, yeah. This is a spatula smiles at the sizzle of sunny side ups in the skillet. That's a nice one there. Oh, and then this one up here. Let me get that up in there. Yeah, that one. Malleomorphic minerals in mounds of majestic muck. I actually got that one featured last month on the cover of the Oxford Press Operative Neurosurgery publication, which they distribute to the UK. It's on the cover page. It's really fun. I should get better about posting stuff like that. But yeah, I think, and these 4 here, I'd probably throw in. So that's about 7. That's just what I have access to right here.
What do you think, Jan? You didn't just get answers, you got a tour as well. So how about that? And I have a question or a comment and a question here from Suzanne. From Suzanne Scott, who was on Monday. Nicely done, Devin. I especially like the way you spoke of play in your work and practice. I'd like to know about the feather on your shirt.
Oh, yeah. That's a gift from my dear friends in Portland. They gave me this. It's a wood carved duck feather. They know that I'm kind of a duck enthusiast. I have my kitschy duck, a miscellaneous waterfowl mug here. And I had the pieces in that painting over there that kind of have a couple of duck forms. I've even made some sculpture. I'll show you an old sculptural piece that has it's just something that it's just something for fun, I guess. I like to be silly and play, but this is a shoehorn that I made out of an old garden trowel, but it's functionless because it would actually cut, the skin. So you can't really use it, but it's just the idea. And it kind of looks like a duck bill. Yep. And then this is some carved redwood, but then this is a duck call that they use in hunting. So it makes that kind of sound. There were some more parts to that, but
that's amazing.
Sculpture kind of collects dust when I make it because it's just a big clunky object. But so yeah, it's a thematic kind of branding kind of thing that I do. So
awesome. Well, anytime I spend time with you, Devin, I always leave smiling. I always enjoy our conversations. We've had many conversations at shows over the years, and you're a joy, and you're so immersed in your work and so passionate when you share that it really is a beautiful thing. And I'm excited to see what you do next. And just thank you for spending this time. Jan says, I love it. Thank you. Suzanne echoes it. Great. I love it. Thank you. So, Devin, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here today.
Cheers, Rachel. Thanks for talking. And I look forward to your next guest.
All right. And I will. Oh, wait. Hang on. Is the duck shoe for sale? Duck shoe horn for sale?
Yeah, absolutely. I still have the shoe and the shoe form and everything. So.
Well, actually, before we go, give me your website so I can.
Yeah. So, folks, if folks do want to follow me, I'm on Instagram. There's my handle. It's basically just my name. DevinCogger.com. That's my website. And Devin Cogger. That's my handle on Instagram. Yeah.
I've added the website to the stream as well. So if anyone wants to just check in the comments, both on YouTube and on Facebook, they can click right on that as well.
Super. Thanks again, Rachel.
Absolutely, Devin. Always a pleasure. And thank you, folks, for tuning in. We will be back tomorrow for another Coffee with Artists, and I will see you then. Thanks, folks.